Are you a fan of technology news? Then the Tech Meme Ride Home is a must-subscribe. For 15 years, TechMeme.com has been the website Silicon Valley checks every day for the latest news. And now, every day at 5 p.m., there's a 15-minute podcast that breaks down the latest news in tech, the coolest gadgets, the latest apps, the biggest funding raises, the most recent social media scandals. The Tech Meme Ride Home is like NPR's Marketplace, but for tech news. A daily, easy-to-understand summation of the latest in the world of technology. Open up your podcast app right now and search Ride Home. Then subscribe and listen to the Tech Meme Ride Home podcast. Again, search your podcast app for Ride Home and subscribe to the Tech Meme Ride Home.
Yes, please stay with us for this historic moment. I am Chris Cuomo. Welcome to Primetime. It's just before 9 a.m. on Tuesday morning in Singapore. Now, any minute, we will see President Trump of the United States and Kim Jong-un of North Korea come face to face. It is historic because it will be the first time any sitting U.S. president has met with a leader of North Korea. The mission. The U.S. made clear today that only full denuclearization will be acceptable. We see here, you know that vehicle, that holds the President of the United States. He will be exiting that vehicle. He will be coming to meet the North Korean leader. So on North Korea's side, what do they want? Well, high on the wish list was a meeting just like this and all the recognition of being on even footing with the man on your screen right now, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Remember, before Trump, no president would offer that. So we're going to see this big meeting. We anticipate a handshake. And then, as Anderson was telling you, then the real moment happens. A one-on-one meeting. No policy people, no protection as far as we know. Just the leaders of the two countries. How long will it go? Minutes? Hours? Will we even know what happened in there? There is a lot of anticipation, a lot at stake. Let's bring back Anderson Cooper on the ground in Singapore. History is unfolding as we speak.
Yeah, you saw some photographers getting in place. That handshake about to take place really any moment now. And as you said, Chris, we really won't know the details of what they discussed except when President Trump decides to talk about it afterwards. There's not going to be, as far as we know, a recording. There's not going to be any minutes taken of the meeting that will be released as far as we know. So the only word we'll get of exactly what was discussed is going to come from President Trump and perhaps Kim Jong-un and the North Korean regime. Certainly a lot of questions about what sort of attitude both leaders, what strategies both leaders are going to be using in this first face-to-face meeting. This the meeting that President Trump wanted to have first before a larger meeting with other officials as well. And then there's going to be a working lunch as well. So, Chris, a lot to watch for and certainly a lot of expectations in the hours ahead.
The category of unusual, though, Anderson, obviously this moment is a first of its kind. But that idea of a meeting face to face, just translators, of course, there's going to be tons of intrigue. What other skills will each of these translators have on either side of the table? Will they be intelligence operatives? Will they be policy people as well? But the idea of being there face to face is one of the reasons that preparation was at such a premium heading into this, because this, as we all know, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. All the hype is over. These two men across the table, how will they regard each other? How will they mix? What will they put on this table initially? What tone will that set going forward? These are major considerations. And, journalists like us, we're left reaching here. There has been very little provided in the way of detail. Even the off-the-record information about scheduling leaves huge blocks of time with a lot of unknown.
Yeah, President Trump was beginning to change sort of the parameters for what the meeting was going to be, calling it in recent days a kind of a get-to-know-you plus. Not something, not trying to raise expectations too high in terms of concrete issues being hammered out and decided on, as you know, Chris, any kind of verification, which Secretary Mike Pompeo has talked about over and over again, the importance of verification for any kind of denuclearization. That is going to take years, perhaps, or at least months to set up the kind of protocols for that and years to actually execute.
Sure. The what of denuclearization is the easiest part of the ask, right? It gets into when it happens and how. We have a ton of great guests to help us through all these happenings as we wait for this face-to-face meeting, the first of its kind between Trump and Kim Jong-un. Anderson and I will take you through it as it happens. We have by my side CNN national security analyst, former director of national intelligence, Jim Clapper. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Chris.
So some of the things that Anderson and I are discussing, this is a first. For Trump to have made this moment happen, how big a deal is this?
Well, it's a huge deal, really a big deal. And I've long maintained that, particularly after I went to North Korea in 2014, that it seemed to me at the time the North Koreans are stuck on their narrative and we're stuck on ours. And it, I think, takes the bigger partner to change that narrative. And that really is what President Trump has done here. So, yes, it's a huge deal.
All right, so we're about 90 seconds away, they tell us from this. This is ceremonial, the two men coming out, the handshake. Do you... there's Kim Jong-un right there, live on your screen right now, walking into position. Obviously, he is alone, unintended, coming in. Here comes the President of the United States. And here are the two gentlemen. Let's watch the moment. And just like that, history has been made. We have Anderson Cooper and Jim Clapper with us. We're watching them right now. The men speaking, I guess, Jim, with who is anticipated to be their translators, right?
That's the way it looks to me. And by the way, I do have some concerns about gauging people through translators. That's a very difficult thing to do because there are huge cultural differences here. My own experience over many years of dealing with Koreans and trying to gauge the measure of a man or woman that you're dealing with through a translator, it's not the same as real estate in New York.
Now, we do hear them speaking to each other. Do we know if Kim Jong-un speaks any English? I'm assuming President Trump isn't speaking Korean.
Yes, I don't know if he speaks English or not. He may understand some, from his experience at schooling in Switzerland.
A little surprised at the apparent warmth in the body language there. You know, not just a handshake, but an arm, held and a hand on his back. Culturally, is that something that Kim is used to? What does that say to you?
Well, probably not. Not too many people in North Korea do that. But it's the occasion called for it, I thought. And so that's, brief body language there. That's a good sign.
Anderson, to you.
Chris, here with Christian Amanpour, also Ambassador Yun and Jim Sciutto as well. For all the waiting, it was quick,
it was
but
quick.
fascinating to see.
It was quick. It was really fascinating, and there was body language. I mean, you saw the arms outstretched. Obviously, President Trump didn't smile. That was something that, or at least not at the beginning, perhaps he did as he was walking on. But Kim Jong-un did smile quite broadly as they were walking off. And, Kim Jong-un has had the old hug and arm tug when he was with President Moon Jae-in of South Korea. And he's had his, good, thorough handshakes with President Xi of China. And I think that this is pretty amazing. Secretary of State Pompeo said yesterday, for all the talk, for all the hopes, for all the everything, nobody can make the decisions except for the two people who will be in that room together. And those are those two people. And I must say, at this precise moment, you do have to remember that just a few months ago, it was all talk of war and bluster and fire and fury and destruction. And then, to be frank, Kim turned on a dime over New Year with his New Year's speech. He took the opportunity to go to South Korea, or to send his delegation to South Korea, his trusted lieutenants, including his sister, to South Korea for what they called the Peace Olympics. And then he gave, through the South Korean president, this remarkable invitation to meet with the President of the United States. So he has actually been almost in the driving seat from the beginning. And talk is better than war. Yeah. What did Churchill say? Jaw, not war.
Ambassador Yun, you've spent a lot of time in meetings with North Koreans over many years. What do you think is going to take place? How important is this face-to-face in private?
I think it's very important. And the way they've met.
Wait, let's listen in.
Yeah.
Mr. President, how do you feel on the first one?
I feel really great.
Yep.
We're going to have a great discussion, and I think tremendous success. They'll be tremendously successful. And it's my honor, and we will have a terrific relationship.
우리는 아주 굉장히 성공할 걸로 믿습니다. 그리고 아주 만나게 돼서 굉장히 영광스럽게 생각합니다. 아주 훌륭한 관계를 가지고 있고 아주 전혀 의심 없이 좋은 관계를 우리가 맺을 거라고 생각합니다.
여기까지 오는 길이 그리 쉬운 길은 아니에요.
Well, it was not easy to get here.
우리한테는 우리 발목을 잡는 그 과거가 있고 또 그릇된 행동과 발행들이 우리 때로는 우리 눈과 귀를 가리고도 했는데 우리 모든 것을 이겨내고 이 자리까지 왔습니다.
The past worked as fetters on our wings, and the old prejudices and practices worked as obstacles on our way forward, but we overcame all of them, and we are here today. That's true. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This way. Thank you.
All right, again, here we are seeing the President of the United States and the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un. We saw the handshake. Now, a second moment. Armed, I guess, with only their translators. We don't think there'll be any policy people in this meeting with them or any kind of security. But here they are having a second press opportunity where President Trump was asked how he feels. Now, you can see the media is being sent out of the room right now because obviously this is going to be a private meeting. Jim Clapper, the president, says this is an honor. We're going to have a terrific relationship going forward. Kim Jong-un responds through his translator that there were a lot of obstacles to get to this point. It was not easy to get here, but we made it through. Now we're looking at the schedule of what they're going to do today. We don't know if this meeting face-to-face with no other policy people will be just minutes or maybe even hours. What do you make of what's been said so far, and what do you anticipate as the dynamic in that room?
Well, so far, so good. I noticed a very similar format as in the press brace in the Oval Office. So, and the president adapted the same pose that he always adapts when he's in the Oval in a similar circumstance. So I think from what you can tell from this, from the optics, it's off to a good start.
Who leads this conversation at the table? What are the rules?
Well, I think the protocol is that Kim Jong-un, who's been a head of state longer, is I think by definition, by protocol, the senior. But I suspect that President Trump will be kind of leading the discussion.
Now, you had said earlier you are wary of only having translators and trying to get a read specifically on North Koreans that way. Why?
Well, it's one thing to gauge the measure of someone when you're dealing in the same language and the same culture. And President Trump's confidence about his ability to size people up is quite true in an American context. This is very different. The cultural norms for Korea are different than ours. And it's hard to read. You can't interpret body language and the completeness of a communication, interpersonal communication, when you have that barrier. And the other thing is, of course, you want to have confidence in the renderings of both translators, that they are accurately rendering what you've said in Korean, and conversely, that you're hearing back in English the correct rendition.
Who do you use as a translator in this kind of instance? Do you have somebody who's pulling double duty? You know, somebody who has some type of policy sophistication as well?
You could. You could have someone, and typically when in my experience with using translators, and I've done this a lot with Koreans, is translators will take notes, their own rough shorthand notes of what their principal is saying, and then will use their notes to convey the message in the other language. So there will be, I think, a semblance of note-taking here just by virtue of the way translators normally do business.
Do you expect it to be brief? Do you think the two men could go an hour or more, or do you think that they'll leave the substance up to seconds and thirds?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. But whatever estimate you make, you have to double it to allow for the translation. So if you say you have an hour meeting, it's really 30 minutes of discussion.
Everything's said twice.
Exactly.
Of course. Let me ask you something. Did you ever think you would see this moment?
Absolutely not. Ever since I served as a director of intelligence of U.S. Forces Korea in the mid-'80s and followed the peninsula ever since, and when I got to go to Pyongyang in 2014, I never thought I'd see this site, and I certainly never thought I'd see the sight of Kim Jong-un and President Moon greeting each other pretty warmly at the DMZ at Panmunjom.
Just a quick reminder for people what was said here. President Trump said when asked moments ago, how do you feel? He said, I feel great. This is an honor for me to be here, and we will have a terrific relationship going forward. Kim Jong-un was gracious and said there were a lot of obstacles on the way here, but we overcame all of them. The right thing to say at the right time. Yes?
Exactly.
And this, of course, the historic moment. Jim Clapper, former director of national intelligence, has been with the North Koreans, has negotiated with them. He says thought that he would never see this moment. So what was Trump able to do that Obama, Bush, Clinton, Bush before him could not do?
Well, I think, Chris, this had more to do with the North Koreans than anything we did. And I think that the North Koreans achieved whatever it is they thought they needed to achieve in the way of a nuclear deterrent, so that they could do this, come to a negotiating table, not as supplicants, which has always been the case in the past, where they've been the inferior, we've been the superior. They have reached a point, whatever it is, that they have confidence in their nuclear capability as a deterrent.
So let's head back to Anderson Cooper, of course, in Singapore. And you heard the President of the United States say it. He feels great. This is an honor to be with Kim Jong-un, and that they will have a terrific relationship going forward. Those are things that we've never heard an American president say before.
Yeah, interesting, especially when you consider the president saying that he would know within the first minute or so about whether a deal could be reached. But as Director Clapper was saying, the difficulty of working through translators is obviously very real. Joined again by Christian Amanpour, Ambassador Yoon, and also Will Ripley. I mean, it's fascinating, Will, just to see the North Korean flag and the United States flag next to each other, just in terms of legitimizing the Korean regime. I mean, this is certainly what Kim Jong-un and what his father and what his grandfather have been wishing for. Is this being broadcast live in North Korea as well?
I don't believe. I'd be very surprised if it's broadcast live inside North Korea. Live events are very rare, but we're monitoring KCNA, so I think that if there is a live signal, we would see it, and I haven't heard us talk about that. But I just keep thinking about, I was in North Korea 8 times last year, and there were times that I was there and President Trump would tweet something insulting about Kim Jong-un, or they would launch a missile, and it seemed at many moments that we were on the brink of war. And it was frightening, frankly, to be inside the country and know that the North Koreans, they were, full speed ahead with their nuclear program. President Trump was talking about a phase 2 military option. And yet here we are seeing this moment, the two of them shaking hands, President Trump saying that they're going to have a terrific relationship. And frankly, I imagine they might hit it off quite well. I mean, you think about it. They were both born into wealth and privilege. Obviously, there's a huge age difference there. But President Trump has indicated empathy for Kim Jong-un in the past, inheriting this regime from his father at a very young age. I mean, he's actually talked about Kim Jong-un with empathy and then kind of mixed that with the insults and the fiery rhetoric. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in that room with the two of them and their translator.
I also want to bring in our Jeff Zeleny. Jeff, are you hearing anything from the White House team at this point?
Anderson, we're not hearing from the White House team that is actually on island there in Sentosa, but I can tell you people back in Washington at the White House, and indeed who are here traveling with the president, who are not there, are watching this with just eager anticipation, seeing the sight, as you were saying, of the two flags together. And the two leaders intentionally sat down, I'm told, because there is a significant height difference. And when a photo opportunity like this, all sort of optics matter. But Anderson, I am struck by it was exactly 3 months and 3 days that President Trump walked into that White House briefing room unannounced. The first time ever in the White House briefing room, a South Korea delegation was there. And he said, we're going to have some news tonight. And then he accepted Kim Jong-un's invitation. 3 months and 3 days, and he is here in Singapore sitting next to Kim Jong-un. Most of his own advisors did not think that it would happen, urged it, perhaps to slow down. He said no. The question now is what his engagement in this is going to be going forward. Some even supporters and friends of his often talk about his attention span. Does he have a long attention span to stay engaged on something in terms of details like this? This certainly is a moment of chemistry, and at least it looks by just watching them, of course, that they are getting along fine. But we know that Kim Jong-un has studied Donald Trump. He's read The Art of the Deal. So this, in some respects, I think getting here was the hard part. This right now we're seeing is probably the easier part. But again, what's going on behind the scenes in terms of the definition of denuclearization and verifying that is what is going to be important if there is a signed statement when the president flies out tonight. And also the timing. Let's keep a watch on the timing. Kim Jong-un announced that he was going to leave shortly after the summit. So then the White House announced that the president also going to leave this evening. But that could always be flexible. Those two men obviously are in charge of their own schedules here. So people are watching this without much of a script from the outside, which is not how presidential events normally are. That's why it's historic, and it's why it's fascinating. Anderson?
Yeah, I mean, Christian, it's very rare that you have an event like this at this level, this magnitude, without months and months of preparation in terms of meetings and hammering out an agreement really in advance. Often a meeting like this is sort of the afterthought. It's just the signings of papers.
Well, that's true. In general protocol, the leaders come together and sign on to something that's been negotiated for months and sometimes years. But the fact of the matter is, as Jeff pointed out, it was 3 months and 3 days ago that he reminded us that actually this invitation was accepted, that Kim Jong-un made all these steps, that he, went to meet the South Korean president, that the South Korean president pushed so hard to have this diplomacy between the United States and North Korea rather than, that horrendous trajectory that we were potentially on right up to the end of last year. So there has been months in order to prepare. We understand that even as CIA Director Mike Pompeo had the North Korea brief and so was obviously pretty read up on everything that's going on. And so they have had a pretty decent amount of time. They both know what they want. And we've all been discussing the merits or demerits of having the leaders meet now. And clearly in this generation, in this time, with this American leader, this North Korean leader, getting a measure of each other seems to be what they want to do first. And I am struck by the body language. There's a lot of touching. I mean, there's President Trump touching his arm, Kim Jong-un touching the president's arm. There's a couple of different handshakes. There's the choreography of the standing straight and getting the photo up at the beginning. I have seen American and North Korean flags together. It was actually in Pyongyang. I've even heard the North Korean Philharmonic play the United States national anthem. I thought I was going to die. It was unbelievably chilling. So there have been these moments in the past where there's been an immense amount of hope. And we just hope that this is one of them that will last, have ripple effects, and that their ministers and others can negotiate and hammer out the major details after this meeting.
A lot more to cover. Let's go back to Chris in New York. Chris?
All right. Now, look, there has been hope in the past, Anderson, but never anything like this. We are living history together. You're looking at the handshake between the leaders of North Korea and the President of the United States. This is a moment that many thought would never happen in our lifetimes. Yet there they are. It was a warm moment. They then went and we saw them sitting in chairs. Jeff Zeleny reports that was because of the height discrepancy. They were there with their translators. The President of the United States said this is an honor. They're going to have a terrific relationship. The leader of North Korea said there were obstacles on the way here, but we overcame all of them. Of course, the process hasn't really even started yet. Now we anticipate the two leaders will be joined only by the people that you're seeing on your screen right now, the translators. No policy people How long will it take? What will that agenda be about? It will be hard for us to know because there is going to be no reporting on the meeting specifically. So let's get to Jim Clapper, former head of the Director of National Intelligence here. So first things first. We hear that Dennis Rodman, we have him on the show later on, may have given Kim's men in New York Trump's book, The Art of the Deal, and that he read it. Significant to you?
Yes, it is. And I've long been an advocate of involving Dennis Rodman in...
So Jim Clapper, the former head of the former DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, you saw Dennis Rodman as relevant.
I do. He is a unique person since he has a relationship with both Kim Jong-un and with Donald Trump. And obviously has great rapport with Kim Jong-un, who is a basketball fanatic himself. So I think that there's a potential here to engage Dennis Rodman in a serious way in promoting this relationship.
So we just found out that the person with Trump is the division chief at the State Department for interpreting, his interpreter.
Right.
That sounds like a pretty heady title. Now, does that mean that person has more portfolio than just language skills?
Perhaps,
division
but
chief.
I think the first... I hope the first criterion was expert fluency in the language. That, to me, in this instance, is the most important thing rather than other hats that that person may wear. And, of course, that person should be a witness to what went on. That'll be important.
So that's good to know, another piece of information. You say the most important question that the president might ask is to say to Kim Jong-un, tell me what you need so you don't have to have nuclear capabilities.
To me, that would be the most important question to pose to Kim Jong-un. And first time in 70 years, North Korea is a family-owned country. We had an opportunity to hear the answer to that question from the horse's mouth. And it would be very useful. It may be a steep price tag, but to start the discussion with what is it North Korea needs, what is it Kim Jong-un personally needs, to ensure that they don't need nuclear weapons for security.
Now, the problem with asking a question, if you don't know the answer to it, is what you get in response. You say that when you were over there dealing with the North Koreans, they were paranoid about bombers. What if Kim answers the question and says, I have some requirements for you when it comes to military capabilities and maybe even nuclear capabilities, then what?
Well, and the point here, Chris, is denuclearization could be a two-way street where this isn't just us mandating to the North Koreans, you must denuclearize, which when I was there was a complete non-starter. That could also apply to us, where they could say, for example, we don't want any more B-1s, B-2s, or B-52s landing on the Korean Peninsula or in operational proximity to the Korean Peninsula. Well, that has huge implications for our nuclear umbrella that we've maintained for decades over both the Republic of Korea as well as Japan. So this has big implications.
Well, you teed up the relevance of Dennis Rodman. We have him joining us on the show. He made his way to Singapore. There he is right now. Good to see you again, my friend. Dennis, can you hear me?
I'm tired. How you doing, guys?
It's good. Do you have what does your hat say?
What's my hat say?
Oh, good. Now I can see it.
Let's
so you
make
have
America great again.
All right.
You got it right there? You got it?
I got it. Thank you. So you made your way to Singapore. How important is this to you? You talked a lot about the prospects for peace when we spoke several years ago. Did you think this moment would ever come?
Well, in my heart and soul, when I first went to North Korea, I was very honored to even be selected to go there. And once I went to North Korea, I was didn't really understand what the old situation was as far as being over there. And when I first met Kim Jong-un, I was more like, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what he represented. I didn't know if he was someone important. But I knew something was going on. But once I got familiar with the culture and the situation over there, I got really used to being there. I felt like I was at home.
Now, you know both men. You've spent time with the North Korean leader. You've spent time with Donald Trump. How do you think the two men size up in terms of how they might get along?
Well, I think the fact that Donald Trump would understand the fact that the people of North Korea have a heart, they have soul, charisma, and they love each other. And I think the fact that Kim Jong-un and his family understands that. I think that President Trump should understand the fact that the reason why the Marshal of North Korea respects Dennis Rodman, the fact that he trusts me. And I gave him something for his birthday. And I thought I couldn't pull this off. And I said to him on the day before his birthday, I said, I'm going to give you a present. And he said, what is that? I said, I'm going to bring a basketball team, professional basketball team to you. He said, can you do that? I said, yes, I can. Even though I knew I couldn't do it, I said, if I fail now, it's going to be a problem. So basically, I got a lot of people together. I got Popcorn here, helped me out, my sponsor. Thanks to those guys. And it happened. And Kim Jong-un came to me and said, Dennis, you know what? This is the first time someone's ever kept their word to me in my country. And I looked at him, I always got emotional. I said, wait a minute, hold on. He said, someone's never kept their word to you in your country? He said, yes, this is the first time someone's ever suggested that. And I came through, and I think that he really appreciated that, the fact that he's not normally hearing someone that's trustworthy. And I think that country is normally hearing people that's always lying, deceitful, and not trustworthy. And I think that if Trump goes in there with a great heart, with his heart on the table, and let Kim Jong-un see him, really emotional as far as like speaking to him. It ain't got to be about war. It ain't got to be about hatred or what happened in the future or in the past. The past. We'll move on to the future. And I've told people about Kim Jong-un. He's all about the 21st century. He's trying to progress his country. And Donald Trump is going to do a great job is try to reach out and make sure that our hands, Americans, our hands are always open, because as Americans, we have let so many people around the world join us to be happy in one country, that's the United States. And now we have really put ourselves on a line to reach out to North Korea, and they've been so gracious to me, my family, and the United States. So let's make this happen. If Trump can pull this off, more power to him.
Dennis, did Kim reach out to you, or any of his people reach out to you, the president's people, anybody reach out to you for insight into the other side?
Well, you know what? I've talked to those guys the last 5 years.
Which guys?
And I talked to Kim Jong-un and an administration over there 5 years ago. And he asked me 5 years ago, we sat down for lunch. And he sat down and asked me, hey, Dennis, I would like to ask you three things. If you go back to tell the president of the United States these three things, and I would be willing to talk to him. And it's a true story, and I got my people here that was there that heard the conversation. He said things like, if they can move the ships back from South Korea, I would do what I have to do to listen. If you can move certain things or do certain things, I will listen. My ears will be open. And I tried to do that to Obama, and Obama didn't even give me the time of day. I asked him, I said, I have something to say from North Korea. He just brushed me off. But that didn't deter me. I still kept going back. I kept going back. I showed my loyalty and my trustworthy to this country. And I said to everybody, I said, the door will open.
I remember you saying it. I remember you saying it. Let me ask you something. Does Kim understand English, Dennis?
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing. When I said those things, when I said those damn things, when I went back home, I got so many death threats. When I was sitting there protecting everything. And I believed in North Korea. And when I went home, I couldn't even go home. I had to hide out for 30 days. I couldn't even go home. But I kept my head up high, brother. I knew things were going to change. I knew it. I was the only one. I never had no one to hear me. I didn't know one had to see me. But I took those bullets. I took all that. I took everything. Everyone came at me, and I'm still standing. And today is a great day for everybody. Singapore, Tokyo, China, everything. It's a great day.
It is a great day. This is a historic day.
I'm so happy.
You were saying to me years ago that you thought this would happen. And I want to let you be ready for me to ask you another question. I know you're very emotional about this.
Go ahead.
This is what I want to know. I want to know, well, you're an emotional guy. You feel very deeply about things. People who've been around you understand that.
Right.
Why did you feel so strongly that you needed to make something happen for North Korea? There's so many places you could have gone in the world that have, a much easier path to peace than North Korea, given the record of human rights abuses and other practices of this despotic regime. But you chose North Korea. Why?
Well, I feel like I said, I was very naive when I went over there. I didn't understand and expect all the things I was getting when I went over there. They said, "Do you realize what you was doing, Dennis, when you went over there?" I said, "No." I thought it was just another one of those things. I was just doing some charity event. I knew nothing about North Korea. I just thought I was going to play basketball and just treat the people and be happy, and that was it. But it turned out to be so much more bigger than what I thought. And I felt the fact that, just listen to the people, seeing the kids, seeing the people there, and just meeting the regime, Kim Jong-un, and the whole marshals and everybody. I just felt like I fell in love with the country from day one. And I feel like that, I guess I owe it to myself, and the people around the world. What? I'm not in here. I'm not in this for no money. I never started it for no money. This is not about being the greatest person in the world that lead these two people together. It has nothing to do with that. I just wanted to see it get done so we all can live good together.
Well, here's the first
hatred,
day.
No more hatred.
Here's the first day. Let's see where it goes. Let me ask you something. You talk about speaking with Kim Jong-un. Does he understand or speak English?
The one thing about him, though, I always say about him, he's more like a big kid, even though he's small. He's more like a big kid, but he loves to have a good time. And I was saying last night or this morning that he was going around taking selfies and stuff like that. And I was saying that this guy wants to be around the world. He wants to come to America. He wants to enjoy his life. He wants his people to enjoy his life. But I think that the fact that he doesn't have the tools and maybe the politics of this whole meeting is just going to happen. I think this is going to change a lot. And I hope the fact that President Trump can understand, knowing that Kim is trying to reach out and trying to get in the 21st century.
That's the big question. I want to ask you about that in a second, but let me just get an answer to this. Do you think he speaks or understands English?
Well, I think he understands bits and pieces. If you talk about basketball, yes, he understands that.
So you think it's about what he wants to talk about? Do you think he's studied English?
I can say one thing. I think people know that Kim Jong-un is not a dumb man. I think he's understanding from his grandfather and his father. I think that he's trying to protect his people. He's trying to protect his honor and his and everything that has to do with his country. But like I say, that's respect. That's respect. Nothing's going to happen overnight. It's going to take time.
100%. 100%.
If Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump understand that, if they understand the fact that if we just sit there and have a smooth, a comfortable relationship, smile, laugh, joke a little bit, okay, great. It ain't got to be war. It's got to be something that everyone can be comfortable about.
Right.
And I know this meeting is going to be a great meeting.
Well, that's the hope, Dennis. We'll see where it goes. It had a good start. They did the handshake. There was good body language. They said the right things. It's all perfunctory at this part. It's the opening ceremony, and we'll see what happens when we start getting reports about the actual policy negotiations. But you talk about the Kim Jong-un side and North Korea side. Did you hear from the White House at all today?
Well, yes, I did. But and the good thing about it, yes, Donald Trump reached out. He called his secretary, and she called me and said, "Dennis, Donald Trump is so proud of you. He thanks you a lot." And that means a lot, because after all these years, the fact that I somewhat had something to do with this North Korean situation, but I don't want to take any credit where credit's due. I think we all need to take credit. And I'm just here. I'm just so thankful to be here. I'm glad the fact that this is happening. The world saw it. I saw it. My kids saw it. So you know what? It's just hope for the best. We don't need a miracle. We don't need a miracle. We just need the doors to be open so we can start fresh and make this a better place in the world, baby. That's it.
Well, look, sometimes it does take a miracle. I mean, you're dealing with some really tough things on the table here. I know that you've had good experiences with the leader of North Korea, and this is a nice moment. I'm not looking to get into it with you again, but now things you didn't know then. There's a lot of violence.
Right.
There's a lot of negativity, and it all stems from your friend, the ruler of North Korea. This man isn't all selfies and smiles. He's responsible for the deaths and hardship of a lot of people. How can you be sure he wants something better than what he is right now?
Well, as we know, Chris, the fact that, I'm not a politician. I'm not sitting there trying to fight the fact that, I'm on his side 24/7. I'm not doing everything right to say the right things to make him look like a better man, a better person. I've never been like that. I've always been like down the middle. Here it is, He's a good friend to me. That's what I look at. I don't see the politics of this whole situation. I don't want to see that. I want to see that to go away. I want us to see us get along, to have a handshake, to have a smile, have a glass of iced tea. Just talk to each other friendly. I don't need to worry about the war stuff and all the stuff that's going on. I don't know anything about that. I just want to do one thing, bring force to North Korea and try to bring that connection with us to North Korea. That's it, sports. Everything else should be Donald Trump's hands and people in the White House hands. I'm out of it. I'm just so happy just to be here, man, and to see everyone in the world get emotional like I did, cry to see it really, really happen. And Donald Trump should take a lot of credit for this because he went out the box and made this happen. So anyway, I want to say one more thing before I leave. Can I say one more thing?
You can say whatever you want. Go ahead.
Okay, so can I thank some people, though, while I'm here? Can I thank some people?
Yeah, go ahead. But let me ask you something. Don't go on a whole tour about it, but I want to ask you something else. But thank somebody if you want to thank them. Go ahead, Dennis.
All right, so, I just say thank, all the good people that's really stood by me, Darren Prince, Vo, all the guys that went with me, North Korea. I'm thinking Chuck Daly. I'm thinking Phil Jackson. I'm thinking Jeannie Buss. I'm thinking, Pete Giannopoulos. I'm thinking Eddie Vedder, the Pro Jam. Everybody that supported me through all these things. So, I'm thinking my kids, they still with me after all these years. All the things I've done up and down, they still with me.
All right.
I just want to thank everybody, man. And plus, you know what? I'm thinking these guys at Popcorn that supported me through this whole venture.
I got you. We see the shirt there. You got a good outfit. You got Trump on the top. You got Popcorn on the bottom. Let me ask you one more thing. You think there's any chance that you might have a role in this process? Has anybody reached out to you or given you reason to believe that whether it's the North Koreans or it's the Americans, that they may reach out to you as some type of resource here, something that is part of this mix going forward?
Well, you know what? Like I said, that's not my job. I wish that the fact that people would quit putting me in that title role, the fact that I should be involved with this whole politics stuff. I just want to be involved with the sports aspect. And if they can use me in that direction, maybe I can have some type of common sense to shine some light on what's really going on in North Korea. If Trump want to come ask me about certain things, he'll probably figure it out today, and I hope he does. But if he want to ask me one-on-one, I'm willing to do it. So, like I said, I know a lot of things, but like I said, this is Trump and Kim Jong-un's day. This is the world's day. It's not my day. I just came here because I wanted to see face-to-face in my own eyes. So thank you guys for having me on in the world. Thank you guys. I'm going to do more important things down the road. Please.
Well, Dennis.
Step behind me. Be behind me.
Dennis, it is good to see you. I'm glad you are well. I know that you're on your own journey. Stay healthy. Stay happy. And please let us know what you find out about this process. It's good to see you, Dennis Rodman, in Singapore. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, brother.
All right.
All right, brother.
Jim Clapper, we're looking at the moments earlier. It is bizarre, to say the least. But here I am next to the Director of National Intelligence, former director for the government. And Dennis Rodman, also known as the Worm for how he played basketball, he is our best resource at this point right now for understanding the minds of the two men, especially Kim Jong-un.
I agree, Chris, and I tell you,
as weird as that is,
as weird as it is,
say,
and
they made a movie about that.
This whole thing,
this is still weird.
This whole thing is unconventional, and believe me, I saw Dennis Rodman I'd never seen before in the course of that interview, and you drew that out of him. There's a lot more depth there than I think meets the eye. And he does understand Kim Jong-un. And all of the rest of us pundits who are kind of amateurs and haven't had that direct contact like he has.
Let me ask you something. You've been around a lot of bad people in your life on the leadership level. I'm not talking about American politics. I'm talking about, like, killers and people. For Dennis, and I've been with Dennis a number of times now, and he believes that two things can be true at once. That Kim Jong-un is good to him, has a good heart, but that what he calls politics he's talking about a murderous regime. Can two things like that exist at the same time in some way?
Yes, they can. I believe he made a good point about that, although he kind of dismissed as political the brutality of the regime, and it is. But we've had dealings with official diplomatic dealings with brutal regimes in the past, and it is, for me, it's pragmatic. What is the best interest of furthering peace and stability in the world? And that's what really is at stake here. And I think Dennis's point about let's focus on now and the future is a good one.
Except you do have to have eyes wide open about
who
you're dealing with.
And I hope somehow in this summit meeting that the subject of human rights abuses is brought up by the United States with Kim Jong-un and North Korea.
Right, and that's really the big topic on the table. Let's talk about that because, look, this is not within Dennis Rodman's portfolio. It is coincidental, let's say, at the least, that he was saying 4 years ago that he thought something like this would be happening if somebody would give it a chance. The Obama administration wasn't open to it. This administration was. And now here we are. But human rights matters. You can't do a deal with a country if they're not going to change their practices on a fundamental level of freedom and the price of murder for political objection. Does that have to be on the table in this meeting between the president and Kim right now?
Yeah, it does. I do think, though, there is perhaps, and I may be criticized for this, but there probably is a priority order. And I think the first order of business is to get our arms around some sort of path ahead on denuclearization. But that's should not be to the exclusion of these other considerations, normally human rights conditions. So what we're about here is trying to make the North Koreans alter their behavior profoundly, both with respect to what they now view as their security and their long-established practices of brutality and suppression of their people.
Jim Clapper, thank you so much for helping us understand the history unfolding before our eyes right now.
Well, thanks, Chris. It's been great to watch the history with you.
Boy. So this is a moment many thought would never happen. We're going to take a break right now. We have much more for you. Right now, you're looking at earlier moments. Those two men, the leader of North Korea and the president of the United States, are in a meeting alone with only interpreters. Imagine what might be said right now. When we come back, we'll take you through the possibilities. Stay with us.
Been putting off buying new glasses? Zenni Optical offers a huge variety of high-quality, stylish frames and state-of-the-art optics, starting at just $6.95. We've got all the great frame styles you want in materials like titanium, carbon fiber, and high-luster acetate. Plus, Zenni offers prescription glasses and sunglasses. So at this great price, you can build your eyewear wardrobe. You can get 10% off your entire order with code 360. So visit Zenni, Zenni, today at zennioptical.com and use code 360.
Welcome back to Cuomo Primetime. We are all living a piece of history together tonight. President Trump and Kim Jong-un, they're in a room right now just with interpreters. The fate of peace in the region on the table. It is heady stuff. There's a lot to break down, so let's bring in Jennifer Granholm and Rick Santorum for a great debate. But let's start on the same page tonight. I cannot believe there's any disagreement that we are living a moment that people thought would never happen. True on both sides?
Agree with that.
True.
That the implications are huge for peace on that peninsula. Yeah. And this part's true, too. The person who knows both men best is Dennis Rodman. He is Rick Santorum. He said to me a few years ago when we went through all that controversy about him being there, and he knows he was wrong about Kim and the politics and the human rights and what he thought he knew about Ken Bay. He knows he was out of his depth on that. But he said, this guy wants to come into the 21st century. He wants a seat at the table. People laughed him off. And yet, here we are. What's your take?
Boy, I would like to be as optimistic as Dennis Rodman.
All right, these are live pictures right now. Hold on a second, Rick.
Okay.
These are the gentlemen. All right, so it was a meet and greet. They were in there about, how long do we think, Mel? About 35 minutes or so? The men were in there with their interpreters. Now they're walking again. What we anticipate now is a working lunch, and then the policy teams are going to take over, and the real meat and potatoes of policy considerations, diplomacy, negotiating will begin. But here they are. Can't hear the president. We'll try to get you some transcripts about what he was saying there. Now, they're shouting questions, not responded to. Somebody shouted to the North Korean leader, will you give up your nuclear weapons? No response, as you saw there on your screen. And again, we believe the men are now walking in the company of their interpreters. The woman with the President of the United States is actually a division chief at the State Department in the area of interpretation. So who knows, maybe both interpreters were wearing two hats as policy experts as well. But now we believe the two men are going to go and join a larger part of the retinues here for a working lunch, and then the hard work of policy begins. All right, back to Santorum and Granholm. Rick, you were about to say something that was going to be a little bit pessimistic, I think. Go ahead.
Yeah, look, I'd like to be as optimistic as Dennis Rodman, but I have to look at this through maybe a different lens. I look at this as really a failure on the part of the United States and the international community of deterring someone from getting nuclear weapons or doing what was necessary to stop them. And this is the consequence. The consequence is that that leader, a despot, has been elevated on the world stage. And I'm not blaming Donald Trump. Donald Trump has accepted the reality that we now have to deal with a nuclear power that has the ability to strike the United States, and you have to deal with that seriously, and you should give diplomacy a chance. But we could no longer ignore him, isolate him, because that didn't work. We didn't. The failure of the Obama, Bush, Clinton, go on back, of those administrations has now set a template for other countries to say, look, here's how you get your security. You go ahead and you defy the international community. You go ahead like Iran is trying.
Well, what's the alternative?
The alternative is to actually do something to stop them. And whether
like
it's
what could you have done to stop them?
Well, what can be done to stop them.
No, but see, that's the point, though,
whether
Rick.
there's the will to do it.
But it's not just about will. See, you have to be careful with language because it makes it sound like a macho contest. And Jennifer Granholm. It's
not a macho contest. Well, it's a reality. It's a national security contest.
Right, but when you are going to take military action, if that's on the table, Jennifer Granholm, former governor of Michigan, the reason that was brushed away so quickly by the Secretary of Defense, and it is dealt with the same way by military experts up and down the board, is because there is no simple military situation, especially given the logistics and the circumstances on the Korean Peninsula, because you have a ton of Americans and a ton of innocents right within artillery range, let alone any of the heavier weapons that North Korea happens. So military action, while it sounds like, well, that was the alternative, is it really?
No, I mean, of course, it's always an alternative, but it is an alternative with such a high cost. So I'm glad that there is an effort here at diplomacy. I do share Rick's skepticism about what's going to come out of this. I mean, it is true that Kim Jong-un has already won by getting the meeting. And so now the question is, if Donald Trump doesn't come out,
all right, let me stop you for a second. Just let me, Jennifer, 1 second. This is the lunch.
Yep.
This is what we thought was going to happen. So this is now confirmation. You see the North Koreans on one side, the Americans on the other. You see General Kelly there. You see Secretary of State Pompeo there. The woman next to Donald Trump is the division chief of the State Department of Interpretation. Let's listen to the president.
The dilemma that until this point has been unable to be solved. I know that working together we will get it taken care of. So, good on. Thank you very much.
우리가 함께 협력해서 반드시 성공을 이룰 거라고 생각합니다. 그리고 지금까지 과거에 그러한 현재까지 하는 것들은 불신을 하지 않습니다. 그래서 함께 협력하게 되어서 매우 영광입니다.
우리 발목을 지도하기 시작된 그런 과거를 우리가 더 강하게 이겨내고 들어보고 저희들이 지금과 혹시를 다 지우고 이런 뭐 해결을 하지 않으면 훌륭한 동화의 전주곡이라고 생각합니다.
We successfully took power. We have celebrated on time and celebrated on the and we are hoping for having to take a lead on the second. Hence, I believe that this is a prelude to peace. I believe so.
조금 전에 말씀드린 것 같지만 이때까지 이끌어준 다른 사람들이 생각하지 못했고 물론 저는 각과 함께 궁금한 순간이
We will solve it, and we will be successful. And I look forward to working on it with you. It will be done.
우리는 힘을 것이고 그 문제 해결할 것입니다. 그리고 함께 해결하는 것을 기대하고 있습니다.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so they're going to move media out of the room right now so the working lunch could continue. Just to refresh, if you're just joining us now, you see Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, his head there on the left. You see the President of the United States with his team with him right now. They've had their handshake. They've had their face-to-face alone with interpreters. Now they're having their working lunch. We just heard the president and the North Korean leader exchange niceties once again, saying we will work on things, we will get through, we will cooperate, we will negotiate, all the types of things you imagine here. We have Jim Sciutto there in Singapore monitoring this. What do you make of the events so far?
Well, I'll tell you, Chris, one thing notable about the one-on-one, at the end of the day, they were across from each other, mano a mano, just for about 45 minutes or so. So as Director Clapper made, that's really 22 minutes of conversation, right, with translation. So it doesn't seem possible during that length of time that they had a substantive beyond meet and greet conversation, getting into the nitty-gritty details. Now that's where they are. They're in the working group. So following, you might say, something of the protocol here, that one-on-one that some U.S. allies, I've spoken to Asian diplomats, were concerned would President Trump go further than the allies were comfortable with? Would President Trump go further than his own advisors or intelligence community were comfortable with? In a meeting of that length, it seems less likely. Now they're sitting there with their advisors. That's just one point I would make in light of the length of the one-on-one meeting. Still substantial about relationship building, no question, but raises questions about to what degree of detail they could have gone in a meeting of that length. The other point I would make is this, Chris, is just Kim Jong-un, his father, his grandfather, they have sought for decades parity, respect with the world, specifically with the U.S., to be treated on a level. And he has that. He got that. The handshake in front of the flag, side by side, the one-on-one. And remember, what got him there wasn't his charm. It wasn't his diplomatic prowess. It was nuclear weapons, right? And that was why they sought them, part for their survival, for the survival of their regime, but also for respect. Those weapons got them there, and that is one reason why even the CIA assesses, in their view, that it's a high bar, that they view it as unlikely that they give up everything in light of what that got them.
Well, right now, Jim, the question is, will they give up anything, right? I mean, look, the gamble here on the part of the United States has always been clear. You are giving the Kim regime exactly what they wanted. It's very high on their wish list, as you just said. And the open question is, what will you get back? And you have a difficult balance with nukes and human rights, and both are going to have to be addressed. There's a lot on the table. We see the teams. Let's see where it goes. Jim Sciutto, thank you very much. Jim Clapper, Rick Santorum, and Jennifer Granholm, thank you for being with us and helping us get through this. We'll be back at midnight Eastern with a special live 2-hour edition of Cuomo Primetime to update you on everything that happens between now and then at the summit. But don't go anywhere. We have nonstop coverage of the summit. It continues right now with Don Lemon and CNN Tonight. Don?